is 651-304-9986. The Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Call the Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline at 651-304-9986. Wow. That's 651-304-9986.
Minnesota has the only original wolf population in the continental United States, and 80% of Minnesotans believe the wolf should be protected. Howling for Wolves is asking Minnesotans to respect our true wildlife manager, the wolf. Their survival is critical to our ecosystems, our communities, and even our economy. As highly intelligent animals with strong social bonds, Minnesota wolves deserve to be protected and admired. Learn more at howlingforwolves.org. Let's live and let howl.
Hey, Cudahy to all my friends and relatives in four directions. This is Robert Pilot of Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake. I'm here to ask you for your support. Finding honest Native-centered news is not easy. But with your support, we're able to provide accurate information about Standing Rock, Line 3, treaty violations, and COVID-19 in our Native communities. Please visit Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon and donate if you can. That's Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon. Pinigigi, and thank you for your support.
Hey, Ogama, I've been hearing a lot about this term, climate justice. What is that?
Climate justice is recognizing that the negative impacts of climate change don't affect all people equally. It also means transitioning from a fossil fuel-based economy to a more sustainable future. MN350 is one of the groups that's pushing for this transition to protect our futures. You can even get involved too.
That's great, especially since I'm concerned about pipeline projects like Line 3. How can I help MN350?
Just find them on Facebook or visit mn350.org.
AM 950 weather, I'm Patrick Lilia. Rain showers likely to continue tonight with a low of 49, then more rain on Friday with a high of 55. Cafe Latte at Victoria and Grand in St. Paul offers an award-winning assortment of sandwiches, salads, and soups, a pizza and wine bar, and treats from the bakery made fresh daily. Check them out at cafelatte.com. That's Cafe Latte, Victoria Street and Grand Avenue in St. Paul.
Portions of Native Roots Radio may be pre-recorded.
It's a good day to be indigenous.
Get up, stand up.
They are going to become more brutal.
Because all the hippies were trying to be Indians anyway.
They're going to become more repressive because it's a matter of dollars and their illusionary concepts of power.
Hey, Victor.
We must live in balance with the earth.
And also with recent happenings at Wounded Knee.
I am awake. Hey, Cudahy to all my friends and relatives in four directions. You're listening to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host with Kunjahade, which means distant thunder in Ho-Chunk. My colonized name is Robert Pilot, and we discuss national and Twin City Native news and events. And as we all know, Native issues are human issues, and human issues are Native issues.
This portion of the show is brought to you by the Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline. Their number is 651-304-9986. You can call them Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Wow, you read that well. It's interesting that they've expanded to more hours, and that's exciting. There's so much misinformation on that interweb. It's just amazing, Ogama.
Absolutely. We're still hearing, and I'm sure everybody knows people, even some people that are close to them that still don't have accurate information on the COVID-19 virus or on the COVID-19 vaccinations that are available.
Oh, it's interesting too. I talked to a former student of mine who's really just an all-around awesome person. Her mom has gotten a vaccine, and she was reading that on the interweb or on one of these sites that it wasn't good for pregnant people, and we had to talk her off the cliff, so to speak, and give some valid information. Speaking of which, before I get to your news, Ogama, one of the things, we're missing Wendy today, and one of the exciting things is 2 weeks ago we got our second shot, and so she's meeting with some people that she hasn't seen in a long time, and so we're giving her the day off, and hopefully she's listening right now and proud of us. But we'll see. But again, I'm missing my sidekick, Wendy Pilot, who's also happens to be my awesome and beautiful wife. It says that right here somewhere in my paper. But hey, let's get to Ogma with the news. And I just want to say one thing before we get to Ogma is this is Native news, and it's Native centric, and you probably won't hear that anywhere else all over Turtle Island. So we're really proud to have Ogma. And here's Ogma with the news.
Hey, Miigwech Robert. I'm Ogama I'm a member of the Red Lake Nation in northern Minnesota. So if you haven't heard yet, Line 3 is happening in Minnesota right now. Enbridge Energy is a foreign company from Alberta, Canada, that's trying to build this tar sands pipeline in Minnesota. It's really gaining a lot of nationwide momentum. There's been actions in San Francisco and other parts of California. There was actions, and people are speaking out against Enbridge all over the country. They've been speaking out against Enbridge in Massachusetts, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And then there were actions that took place in New York, DC, and Oregon. So I just want to take a moment and recognize our allies and those fighting in all manners for a just transition away from fossil fuels, and for us Indigenous people who often face the brunt of these massive infrastructure projects that we really don't need, like tar sands oil. And I want to give a special shout out to James for helping me source a lot of this information, helping me keep on top of this.
Well,
So without further
send them a T-shirt.
yes, we should. So without further ado, there's two big events coming up here in Minnesota I want to touch base on. So April 16th through 18th, Red Lake Treaty Camp is hosting a 2-day canoe camping event to honor and pray for the water. They will be gathering at the Lower Red Lake Dam on Friday, April 16th, breaking midway to camp and finishing up at the Red Lake Treaty Camp for a water ceremony and supper. You can RSVP by calling 701-312-9032. There's also an email that you can RSVP to for that event. I will post that on the Native Roots Radio Facebook page for you all. That's coming up quick, so I want to make sure people were aware, because the 16th is not that far away when you're packing for a canoe trip. And then coming up on Earth Day, Native Roots Radio is working with Honor the Earth to host a Mother Earth Day concert event. So there's going to be live music, special speakers, and it's going to basically be celebrating Mother Earth, Honor the Earth style. And what we want is a just transition. And that event is also on the Native Roots Radio Facebook page, so you can check that out as well.
Well, it's also going to be simulcast here on AM 950 and also Double Radio 92.7. So we're excited to team with them too.
Yes, exactly. It's going to be a big event. I'm really excited for it. So going back to Enbridge here, a lot of my news today is actually centered around Enbridge and kind of what they're dealing with. So they're facing calls for shutdowns of Line 3 in Minnesota, Line 5 in Michigan, and now the Weymouth compressor station, which is a natural gas compressor station in Massachusetts, all of which involve significant environmental justice issues. So their PR team is probably working a lot of overtime right now. While it hasn't really reached the shutdown point in Wisconsin, Enbridge is in hot water there. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources has ordered Enbridge Energy to investigate contamination from the 2019 pipeline spill in Jefferson County. The Wisconsin DNR said they now must test nearby wells to determine how far the toxic chemicals that leaked spread. So this spill happened in October of 2019. Enbridge's Line 13 leaked more than 1,200 gallons near Fort Atkinson in Wisconsin. They did not file the report to inform the DNR of the spill until January of 2020, 15 months later. And the order for them to test the well is now coming after a public hearing where residents questioned the company's response to the spill because they had not reported it the way that they should have. Enbridge did do initial groundwater testing in that area in October, and it revealed benzene at concentrates more than 4,000 times the state enforcement standard, plus 2 other chemicals that were detected. And then when they retested in January, it actually showed higher levels of benzene and toluene. Neighbors who have recently heard of the spill said they're worried their water's unsafe, and that they've identified 10 private wells within a 1,200-foot radius of the spill, but reports now indicate only one of those wells has been tested. Enbridge only has 60 days to submit a new investigation plan that includes the drawings of its underground pipes and valves. So if you're living in Wisconsin, this is knocking on your door here.
Yeah.
And then
I know I touched on this a little bit yesterday, but in Massachusetts, the Weymouth compressor had a major unplanned gas release, of which Enbridge was trying to say was like an act of God. But the U.S. Representative Stephen Lynch for Massachusetts is actually requesting an immediate shutdown of the Four River Basin compressor station where this happened. So this would be the third unplanned gas release at the facility since Enbridge began utilizing it in September of 2020. So unplanned gas releases occurred September 11th and September 30th of 2020, and then again on April 6th. The release on April 6th released hundreds of thousands of cubic feet of natural gas, and the September 2 leaks in September released 444,000 cubic feet of natural gas.
Wow.
It is awful. Meanwhile, Enbridge's CEOs said yesterday they still expect to complete and begin service by the end of the year on Line 3 here in Minnesota. Like, I am blown away by that statement, Mr. Monaco. You might want to check with your PR department.
Wow. Yeah, just amazing, Ogama, just totally amazing. I'm always stunned, and I really appreciate you and Joseph checking in on all that stuff because it's just amazing information that you bring to us.
Absolutely, yeah, happy to do it because, like you said, this is information you don't hear.
Hey, you know, Wendy's not here, and I'm thrown off a little bit here. The cat's talking to me, the dogs are barking, but you're listening to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake. And up next, Robert Lilligren, Director of Native American Community Development Institute, NACDI, and we're excited because we always get a nice little what's going on nationally with Robert and also locally. And you know, this is Minneapolis is where a lot of Native American stuff is started, good and bad. So hey, we'll be right back with Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake. Stay with us.
Unwanted sexting or photos, inappropriate jokes, even tickling or wrestling can feel like a violation. Catcalling, cornering, or groping, getting them drunk or high for sex, recording sexual acts without permission, hurting someone because of their sexual orientation, raping a family member, a child, a date, a friend, a stranger, purchasing a human being for sex. You make the choice every single time. Sexual violence is many things. Make a choice. Do not do it.
Sponsored by the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition.
Hey, Ogama, I've been hearing a lot about this term, climate justice. What is that?
Climate justice is recognizing that the negative impacts of climate change don't affect all people equally. It also means transitioning from a fossil fuel-based economy to a more sustainable future. MN350 is one of the groups that's pushing for this transition to protect our futures. You can even get involved too.
That's great, especially since I'm concerned about pipeline projects like Line 3. How can I help MN350?
Just find them on Facebook or visit mn350.org.
We have vital information we would like to share with you. The Department of Indian Works St.Paul partnered with the Minnesota Department of Health to open the Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline. They provide information on testing sites, isolation space, vaccines, housing assistance, and food resources. If you or someone you know has questions about COVID-19 or has questions to determine if you should get tested, please call them at 651-304-9986. Again, the number is 651-304-9986. The Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Call the Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline at 651-304-9986. That's 651-304-9986. Hey, welcome back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Wakanja Hade.
This portion of the show is brought to you by the Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline. You can call them at 651-304-9986, and you can call them Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Advertising works. Since they've been advertising with us, they had to open up a couple more days. So it's an amazing thing. You're always kind of going, hey, is anybody listening to us? And then you hear all these things, or you run into people. I'm sure Robert Lilligren's run into people too that's heard him on the radio or on our show. And but hey, we're here with Robert Lilligren, who is the director of Native American Community Development Institute, NACDI. And I just want to introduce Robert to all our Madison people. Robert's been a city council member. And you know what? Maybe what I can do, Robert, is maybe have you break it down because, Wendy, the dog whisperer and cat whisperer is not here today. And the dogs have their own little show going on in the background. Welcome, Robert Lilligren.
Yeah, bonjour, Robert. Bonjour. Nice to be here. And where's Wendy? What have you done with Wendy?
Well, it's 2 weeks now since we got her last test, and she, as she's retired and she's meeting, she was a pharmacist at the University of Minnesota, and she's meeting a couple of former workers with her, and so they're out having dinner, forgetting all about radio.
I love it. Yeah, thanks for having me here, and greetings to our relatives in Madison, and as you broaden your audience base here. And so I guess just a quick thumbnail introducing myself. I'm a citizen of the White Earth Ojibwe Nation. I live in South Minneapolis. I work for the Native American Community Development Institute, NACDI, which is an asset-based community development organization working to really, one big community-led project is promoting the American Indian Cultural Corridor in South Minneapolis along East Franklin Avenue in the heart of our community. As you said, Robert, I served on the Minneapolis City Council for 12 years. I was the first tribal citizen elected to that office, or to any office actually within the city of Minneapolis. I still stay kind of active in the community. I'm part of the Metropolitan Urban Indian Directors leadership here, which is a 50-year strong forum of Native orgs, some 36 Native orgs from across the Twin Cities, the Minneapolis, St. Paul metropolitan area. And I serve on our regional government, which is called our Metropolitan Council, or Met Council. I was appointed to that position, again, the first tribal citizen to serve on that body. That's 50-year history. I was appointed by Governor Waltz and our Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, my whiter sister.
And good friend.
And good friend.
If I ever want a show, I always drop your name, and what she can do. It's awesome.
I'd show you the latest selfie of the two of us, but I don't want to make you jelly.
You know I'll be jelly. We're also reaching out. We're going to have next week sometime, or the week after, we're having the Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin on our show.
Oh, yeah.
That'll be exciting. So it's great that we're reaching out. And I know, Robert, you know a lot. You have a lot of connections in your political ways and stuff like that all across Turtle Island. And maybe we can talk a little bit nationally, also what's happening here. I'm sure people all over Turtle Island are wanting to know what's happening with George Floyd and what the vibe is in the Twin Cities. Maybe we can start there.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. Oh, I was going to tell you, you were talking earlier about people running into people that hear the show, and I ran into a fan of yours today. I had a meeting down on Lake Street, Midtown Global Market, talking to the person who's just recently been hired to be the manager of the rebuilding along Lake Street. Folks might know from news reports that Lake Street was one of the hardest hit streets in Minneapolis during the unrest following George Floyd's murder. A lot of minority-owned businesses were burned out. It's startling to go down there and see what it looks like today. It looks like a former war zone or something. And so it's an opportunity to rebuild, to reinvest, and to do it making sure that the people who are there are not displaced, but they get to benefit in the reinvestment of Lake Street and other corridors that sustained a lot of damage during the unrest. So anyway, his name is Russ Adams, and a longtime associate, and he said, "Oh yeah, I heard you on Native Roots Radio the other day. You and Robert Pilot sounded good." He goes, "Whenever I'm in my car, I turn it on." So you
Nice,
got your
nice.
fans out there.
Yeah, we still have to get you a T-shirt, and then
Yeah.
I have to spring it on you too that you have to do Wendy's segment too. We didn't want to tell you until we got you on, but no,
What does
but
that mean?
you have to do the animal section. But hey, what I was going to say too, along with what you said, is what we got to let our people, our allies, know in Madison too, and Chicago, and of course the Twin Cities, is that a lot of these people that burned the city down, so to speak, in Lake Street, were not from around here. We're not,
They were not.
and what sense is it to burn down our own grocery store, and then our poor elders and people that don't have transportation have to go another 10 miles to get food, or
Right.
our Walgreens that was burned down on Lake Street. I mean, don't you agree, Robert? It's just
Oh,
like,
totally. I have a lot of friends and relatives who don't live right here in the community saying, well, why are people burning down their own grocery stores? Why are you burning down your own post office? Like, we weren't. And as investigations happened, as arrests and prosecutions has happened, you see that. It's not people from this community, rarely people from this community that are being arrested and prosecuted. It's people that came from suburbs or even out in greater Minnesota or from other states that came with the intent to agitate, the intent to incite violence, to be destructive. And so the vast majority of folks I know that live here in the community when protested were peaceful protesters, are out to protect property. As a matter of fact, just in this meeting this afternoon down on Lake Street with Russ, your fan, Russ, he I was telling him the story. He hadn't seen this video outside Division of Indian Works, which is right there at Chicago and Lake Street, or at 10th and Lake Street, right where the destruction happened. The bank across the street burned down. There was the dollar store across the street the other way burned down. DIW stood and was barely damaged. A small amount of graffiti and protectors from the American Indian movement, protectors from the American Indian Cultural Corridor, protectors from Little Earth, all converged to really protect DIW. And the worst of it, I think it was maybe the third night, and there is this haunting and startling video of scores of community members, protectors, Native folks, standing in the eerie, dark sort of street lights, facing off against a group of National Guard in formation. Very peaceful, almost tranquil. The bank right across the street had started on fire, and the National Guard very much wanted people to clear the area. You don't know what's burning and what you're inhaling, and so they had sort of a negotiation. You could hear someone from the National Guard, someone from the protectors talking, and they negotiated about 15 minutes or something, 20 minutes to clear everybody out. But the beautiful thing, Robert and Ogama, was that the person with the camera is behind all of the protectors, and there's these dozens and dozens of protectors standing there peacefully with their hands on their heads like this, so they're not doing anything to draw attention or fire from the National Guard. And it's really scary and eerie, but it's beautiful in a way. I mean, that's a community with determination, control, capacity, protecting our assets.
well, Robert, and I remember, well, I stayed pretty close to, I'm in St. Paul, Mac Groveland, and I'm like, I think I'm a mile and a half away from Franklin Avenue, and not that far. And I was staying there because we had trucks driving around the neighborhood with tinted windows and no license plates, cruising the neighborhood. And we had a jewelry store broken into. Now, this is miles and miles away from where George Floyd was murdered, and we had a Super America or a Speedway or whatever they're called now burned to the ground. And I mean, what does this have to do? But we had people from all over, I don't know, the 5-state area and maybe even more, infiltrating here and seeing what they could do to cause havoc. Because I think, there was a thing I saw on TikTok about Charles Manson, and his murder to Tate was trying to entice race wars. And I really too young to remember that, and it was just like that's what I felt like what was happening uh, the days after, and the days during the unrest after George Floyd's murder.
It did. It really felt that way, And there was all these reports following social media, credible people who, these dark vehicles without license plates. I'd hear from people in other parts of the city where they said, "Oh yeah, some folks just parked on my with an Iowa license plate, just parked on my block. They all got out and got into a dark SUV with no plates." You hear these reports. There were all these reports of people finding combustibles, gasoline-soaked wood in alleys, like they were set, to be set on fire. It was crazy, and now with the trial starting, a lot of that trauma is triggered again. Communities are very, very tense. It's interesting in Minneapolis right now. I will say that.
It is. Hey, why don't we talk a little bit more about of this? I got a couple more things to talk about, and then talk about what's happened here locally, Robert. So I'm here with Robert Lilligren, director of NACDI, Native American Community Development Institute. We're going to be right back after a short break. You're listening to Native Roots Radio Presents I'm Awake. Hey, Wendy, what are we doing for dinner after the show?
How about we go to J. Selby's on 169 Victoria Street in St. Paul? They have a delicious plant-based menu that's compassionate and environmentally sustainable.
I'm getting their spot-on vegan Big Mac, the dirty secret.
You can pick up and they deliver within a 5-mile radius, or you can call them at 651-222-3263 or visit jselbys.com.
Well, you sold me, Wen. Let's go order at J. Selby's tonight.
I'm hungry.
Hi, everyone. Matt McNeil here. A lot of things are different with the pandemic, but we're still a blue state in Minnesota, so some traditions must go on. It's the 2021 AM 950 Blue State Ball, Saturday, April 17th. But of course, this year, we're doing things a little differently. The 2021 Blue State Ball is going online. It will be a virtual Blue State Ball instead, but the trade-off is pretty much everyone's going to be there. Stephanie Miller, John Fugelsang, Tom Hartman, Santita Jackson, Mike Croup from the Devil's Advocate, Robert and Wendy Pilot, Brett Johnson, and even I, Matt McNeil, will put on some pants and polish up the old Zoom camera for you. Join us on Saturday, April 17th on your computer, laptop, or iPhone. The virtual waiting room opens at 6 p.m., live music starts at 6:30, and we'll begin the long list of hosts at 7 p.m. Tickets start at $20, and tickets are non-refundable. There might be a little more adult language, so you've been warned. Everyone but the host will be muted, but the chat feature will be open, and of course, inappropriate images and chat will be dealt with. Join us on Saturday, April 17th for the 2021 virtual AM 950 Blue State Ball. Ticket information is at am950radio.com. That's am950radio.com.
Hey, Cudahy to all my friends and relatives in 4 directions. This is Robert Pilot of Native Roots Radio Presents I'm Awake. I'm here to ask you for your support. Finding honest Native-centered news is not easy. But with your support, we're able to provide accurate information about Standing Rock, Line 3, treaty violations, and COVID-19 in our Native communities. Please visit Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon and donate if you can. That's Native Roots Radio Network on Patreon. Pinigigi, and thank you for your support.
We have vital information we would like to share with you. The Department of Indian Works St. Paul partnered with the Minnesota Department of Health to open the Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline. They provide information on testing sites, isolation space, vaccines, housing assistance, and food resources. If you or someone you know has questions about COVID-19 or has questions to determine if you should get tested, please call them at 651-304-9986. Again, the number is 651-304-9986. The Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Call the Twin Cities American Indian COVID-19 hotline at 651-304-9986. That's 651-304-9986.
Hello, it's Randy Rhodes, Team Randy. Glad to be a part of the lineup of Progressive Voices on AM 950. Tune in, join us weeknights at 10.
The University of Minnesota Duluth Department of American Indian Studies is accepting applications for the Master of Tribal Resource and Environmental Stewardship. With this degree, you'll develop the skills to help tribal governments manage natural resources and navigate the legal, cultural, and political contours of tribal sovereignty. And you can take all the courses online. To apply for the fall 2021 Masters of Tribal Resources and Environmental Stewardship at Minnesota Duluth, visit umdmtrees.org. That's umdmtres.org.
AM 950 weather, I'm Patrick Lilia. Rain showers likely to continue tonight with a low of 49, then more rain on Friday with a high of 55. AM 950's virtual Blue State Ball is coming and everybody is going to be there. Saturday night, April 17th. Virtual doors open at 6 p.m. and the hosts begin at 7. Tickets are $20 and you can get them at am950radio.com. Get yours today, am950radio.com.
Hi, this is Representative Sharice Davids from Kansas. I'm Ho Chunk, and you're listening to Native Roots Radio.
We are the Calusa Nation.
Hey, welcome back to Native Roots Radio Presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Wakunjahade.
This portion of the show is brought to you by MN350, a grassroots organization fighting for climate justice.
Hey, I was ready to howl, but I guess that's the next segment. Yeah, again, Wendy's not here today. She's taking a much needed break from her retirement, and she's hanging out with people. So, retirement can be, I guess, kind of tiring. So we miss her. And Ogama, good job in picking it up. Hey, I wanted to get back. I'm here with Robert Lilligren and, of course, Ogama. And we are talking to the director of the Native American Community Development Institute, NACDI. And I wanted to bring this up and then we can move on to a different subject if you'd like, Robert. But I want to bring up when the violence and things were happening during after George Floyd's murder. I was getting like PSD kind of a little bit because of all the helicopters driving around. It reminded me of Standing Rock, and I didn't realize that helicopters would trigger me like that.
Yeah, those helicopters were constant, and everybody talks about that, Lisa Bellinger, one of the co-directors of the American Indian Movement here, said she felt like she had her own personal helicopter following her everywhere that she went, and it was triggering, and even now, I mean, we still hear them. They're not in the air constantly. My guess is as we get closer to a verdict in the trial, there'll be more. But when the trial first started, they were in the air again, and it was the same thing, Robert. It was just triggering, giving me a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, and so like I said, it's intense times here in Minneapolis.
Well, and again, thanks for the update. And so tell our audience, especially the people in Chicago and Madison, kind of what you work on, and you always give us a little update of what's happening. I know there's some interesting things happening around the Mississippi River with a couple of groups you're dealing with. But go ahead, I'm going to give you the floor here.
Wow, thanks, Robert. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff here, and we have such a legacy in the Twin Cities, in Minneapolis and St. Paul, of Native activism, advocacy, involvement. The founding of AIM here in 1968, and in the area where I work, excuse me, on East Franklin Avenue, where the American Indian Cultural Corridor. And that's sort of the legacy of our founders, right? There's such a concentration of Native organizations, agencies, residents, and it's really these founders and the early actions of American Indian Movement that created that. So I'm a little old, but I'm not that old yet. But but we're really working in our that's our legacy. And so now I always feel like it's our chance, our time to figure out what we do with this legacy, how we leverage these assets that we have, this concentration of assets that we have in Minneapolis here and in the Twin Cities, to really be the stepping stone into the progress we want to see in the next generations. And so it's really, for me, it's exactly the kind of work I want to be doing. It's very rewarding, and because of my time in public office and public service, I get invited into these conversations where there's not usually a lot of Native voices. And so my first objective is to get more Native voices into those conversations, but also to lift up these perspectives, and ever since our major encampment of people that didn't have anywhere better to live, our Wall of Forgotten Natives, as we call it, in 2018, the whole system around not just homeless sheltering, but the complexities and individual approaches that you need to take to see our relatives, not just into temporary shelter, but into permanent housing, but also the supports they need, if it may be chemical, mental, other health supports, or maybe job training and access to the job market. And so little by little, we're trying to build a better system here, and that's what I spent most of my day today uh, working on as part of a regional collaboration to bring the support and the resources necessary to really not just see that people are safely housed, but that they can live their best life. And the Native voices are still very much in the forefront of the conversations here.
Yeah, you mentioned, I'll just back up a little bit. You mentioned the Native American Indian movement and starting here. And I know Franklin Avenue back in the day in the 60s and even all the way up into the early 90s, and you can help me with that, Robert, as there were so many bars happening on Franklin Avenue, and we don't see that now. Um, there were Indian bars and white bars and things like that. And we had part of the reason, I guess my point was that the American Indian movement started, and especially in that area, was because of the Minneapolis police. And now we're, 50 years later, and we're kind of dealing with the same thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring up that history of AIM, and a lot of their early function was to provide community safety, especially to Native women who were vulnerable because of those bars that used to be on East Franklin. And so in a lot of ways, yeah, it feels like we're coming kind of full circle. And we have generations now of Native people who have been raised with the values and the knowledge of their cultures, their history, their languages, especially. Those are big objectives of the American Indian movement in the beginning. And so as we've talked about before, it's kind of the same day, but it's also kind of a different day because we're on firmer ground. These young activists and advocates and leaders that are coming up are way better prepared than I was at their age to kind of fight this fight. And so we keep pushing. I think there's been a lot of success recently in changing the narrative here, greater awareness of the deliberate strategies of colonization and genocide that created the conditions that we're living in today. And I feel like we have a lot more allies and a lot more access to the levers of decision making and to allocation of resources for sure.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking when you were saying that is that I think maybe there were a few concentrated things going on where Native people, 50 years ago or 40 years ago when we were young, could really gravitate to. But now there's so many different fronts. You got the MMIWR, you have
Mm.
Line 3, you have
Mm-hmm.
just all these social justice things that we have more of our young people engaged.
Truly, and leading, and I think it's the responsibility of older generations to figure out how to support that younger leadership into place. And I love every example that you just raised, Robert. Really resonates with me because those are Native folks figuring out how they want to be engaged, how they want to be to expressing their values rather than somebody from the outside coming in and saying, well, we know what's best for you, do it, do it our way. These are young Native folks doing it their ways. It's a different day.
It is exciting. And, we've talked about this before, but people in probably Madison and Chicago haven't heard us say this, but we weren't proud to be Native when we were young. We've lost
Right.
2 generations of language, culture, and the young people are really stepping up.
They are, and I see it every day. I love now that I'm fully vaccinated and I'm going into the office more, and so back into the community and just seeing all the stuff going on, especially with young people taking the lead. And so yeah, it's really thrilling. This weekend or tomorrow, I guess, the protectors from the American Indian Cultural Corridor AIM, American Indian Community Development Corporation, and Little Earth Protectors, who are just, incredibly
Oh, they were
powerful.
amazing.
They're amazing. So we're all coming together to do some more safety planning as we get closer to the uh, to the jury deliberations for the trial. And you've got some resources now that are coming from, say, the city of Minneapolis, who acknowledges that communities are better at protecting themselves than police can be. And so we're able to kind of live some of these new models of community safety that don't rely so heavily on the police, and have resources to do that. And so, again, led by a lot of younger people. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, I was going to mention this in the first segment too. Is that I saw live video because I was home protecting my own area during a lot of the unrest, and then how that community turned away hundreds and hundreds of marchers away from Little Earth, and it was
Oh
a
yeah,
beautiful thing.
those guys were amazing. I mean, they were bringing concrete barriers, and out from construction sites and blocking off the road because they didn't feel like anyone else was protecting them, and they were starting to get sort of sandwiched between groups of protesters and law enforcement. And it might have been a strategic move on the part of law enforcement, but it was going to pinch Little Earth right in between these, essentially like warring factions. And those guys turned them back. And again, they were loud but peaceful and not threatening to the well-armed National Guard, but they were successful in turning them. I was watching it live too, and I'm like, get out of there, you guys! You're gonna get shot, And then when the National Guard actually turned around, wow, you never see that happen. A total de-escalation.
And I also saw not only that, but I also saw marchers marching towards them, and they pushed them away because who knows? Because we only had one building during that burned down, and that was McGeezy, which means eagle, I think, in Ojibwe.
Yep.
They've been around forever, and they were the only native business out of many that had serious damage. They were burned to the ground, but that was it. And the protectors that you were talking about really protected Minneapolis and the corridor.
They did, and there's kind of an interesting dynamic, now that we're in a rebuild phase. And so, again, I've been kind of invited into advisory groups and things for the city of Minneapolis to talk about how investment should happen, where it should happen. And I constantly have to raise the issue that an awareness that, our community stepped forward, protected the Native community, protected our assets, protected our non-Native neighbors and their assets. And so the predominantly Native corridor, East Franklin Avenue, didn't burn. It's, we're so much like Lake Street, West Broadway, University even, there was a lot of damage. And so now we're almost in a place where we could be sort of penalized because of our success, because we so successfully protected our area. There's less interest in rebuilding and investing. It's like, hey, we weren't doing all that well before the unrest. We still need.
Do you want to stick around with another segment and all three of us talk a little bit? Do you have the capacity?
Yeah, if that works for you, sure, happy to.
All right, great. Hey, you're listening to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and we'll be right back after this short break.
If you're hurting in your relationship or have been affected by sexual violence, you're not alone. Strong Hearts Native Helpline can help you through these difficult and uncertain times. Strong Hearts Helpline is a free 24/7 confidential domestic dating and sexual violence helpline for Native Americans. Help is available by calling 1-844-762-8483 or by clicking on the Chat Now icon on strongheartshelpline.org. This message is sponsored by the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center.
The University of Minnesota Duluth Department of American Indian Studies is accepting applications for their Master of Tribal Administration and Governance. This degree is designed to develop the knowledge needed to work as an administrator in tribal government. Plus, you'll learn about the principles of sovereignty, ethics, law, budgets, and leadership. And you can take all the courses online. To apply for the fall 2021 Master of Tribal Administration and Governance at Minnesota Duluth, visit umdmtag.org. That's umdmtag.org.
Hey, Ogama, I've been hearing a lot about this term, climate justice. What is that?
Climate justice is recognizing that the negative impacts of climate change don't affect all people equally. It also means transitioning from a fossil fuel-based economy to a more sustainable future. MN350 is one of the groups that's pushing for this transition to protect our futures. You can even get involved too.
That's great, especially since I'm concerned about pipeline projects like Line 3. How can I help MN350?
Just find them on Facebook or visit mn350.org.
Minnesota has the only original wolf population in the continental United States, and 80% of Minnesotans believe the wolf should be protected. Howling for Wolves is asking Minnesotans to respect our true wildlife manager, the wolf. Their survival is critical to our ecosystems, our communities, and even our economy. As highly intelligent animals with strong social bonds, Minnesota wolves deserve to be protected and admired. Learn more at howlingforwolves.org. Let's live and let howl.
Annie, I'm Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, and you are listening to Native Roots Radio.
We are the Alusa Nation.
Hey, welcome back to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I'm your host, Wakunjahade.
This portion of the show is brought to you by the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition and Howling for Wolves, protecting wolves for future generations. Oh, I'm like, don't make me howl alone, Robert.
It's the delay. It's the delay. So, hey, we're back here, and usually this is Wendy's portion. And before we move on a little bit, and we're great to have Robert Lilligren hold on with us, and maybe just have a little round table. We're having a really good discussion in those other two segments, so I wanted to see if Robert could still hold on. But do you have any quick update, Ogama, by any chance that we could do a sacred animal update in honor of Wendy?
Yeah, I do have a little article here that Wendy said she wanted to talk about today. So there is a gray wolf that has been named OR93. He's been tagged, and he is taking an unprecedented journey, and wildlife watchers have been watching him now for about 2 months. So the young male gray wolf's caller now revealed that he is in California, and this will be the first time that this particular species of wolf has actually been back in California in like 90 years. It's really amazing. And people are following this all over social media, and they haven't really figured out exactly where or why he's doing this. Basically, and he's all alone. So he's not traveling with his pack.
Oh.
He was born near Mount Hood in Northern Oregon and is now down in California. And it's really kind of this cool ecological story that they're trying to figure out where and why he's been making this journey. And I think there was a black bear or a brown bear last year or the year before, a female that had done a pretty amazing journey up like the west central part of the country as well, like through the mountains. So I think we're be seeing more and more of these types of things happening with animals, and maybe this is a side effect of climate change that maybe they're just not aware of yet. Just to clarify, it was 87 years since a gray wolf had returned to California.
That's amazing, and it came from Oregon, so maybe it's one of those hipster wolves. I don't know. Hey, but that's great news, and that was in honor of Wendy, who's not here today. But Robert, I mean, that can we for the next couple minutes here? Thank you again for staying on. Just touch base a little more about what's happening in Minneapolis. I think we got really stuck in the George Floyd stuff, and I know there's other exciting things like that Mississippi River project that you were talking about that you guys are working on.
Yeah, so that's a really specific project that we're working on through the Native American Community Development Institute, NACDI, and we are partners and under contract to an organization that called Friends of the Falls. And it's about a piece of infrastructure that the Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers controls. There's a natural falls, or was a natural falls, very sacred place to the Dakota people who were here. It was destroyed through industrialization. So there's a dam there now and a lock. The lock has been decommissioned to protect the waters of the northern part of the state from invasive species, carp, species. So the lock isn't working anymore, and so there's a strong interest by a lot of different parties to be involved in what happens at that lock that's now been decommissioned, and there's a little bit of land around it. And there's a slag heap right there by the lock that used to be a very sacred Dakota place called Spirit Island. And so there's been competing interest for what to do there. And a group of really sort of the power people, the power structure of Minneapolis, that are part of this nonprofit called Friends of the Falls, a few years back really committed to sort of stopping the conversation and figuring out how to best center Native voices in the discussion of what happens with this property that's right in the central riverfront of Minneapolis, kind of a premier location that the city and business interests for years, decades really, have been sort of trying to position into that distinctive Minneapolis geography. You know, you think of Minneapolis, you'd think of the Mississippi River, you'd go to the central riverfront. And so there's interest in investing in that area, and to have a group of sort of the power structure people at Friends of the Falls really commit to figuring out how to best engage Native folks. And after several months, probably 6 months of conversation, NACDI contracted with Friends of the Falls to help do that. And I gotta tell you, Robert and Ogama, it's a different vibe. I mean, I've been part of scores, hundreds maybe, of these kind of planning processes and things. And, you know, there's generally the status quo sort of power structure that's really leading the conversation and influencing the outcomes. But in this is just a real systemic willingness to kind of stop and try to figure out how to bring the 4 Dakota tribes from Minnesota, who are the descendants of the people who were here first, who were exiled, the exiled communities into this conversation. And it relates to so many projects that are going on along the river in Minneapolis and into St. Paul, where folks are trying to do similar things. And so it's a new day, a new opportunity. It's really buoyed up by sort of the land back movement, and it's really a thrill to be part of it. I don't know where it's going to end up. We're kind of in uncharted territory here, but it's really rewarding to be working with people who authentically want to center Native voices.
Wow, yeah. And do you feel we only got a couple minutes left now? And do you feel like really a tide's turned? I know since Standing Rock and the 7 fires have gone over. Do you think Minnesota is pretty unique with the way government to government's kind of working now? What is your feeling and gut feeling about that?
Yeah, I wish I could say the tide's turned, but I do think it's turning. And, you know, it's because of capacity that's been built over generations within the community, relationships, you know, that Native folks have here with people inside sort of the power structures and things. So I'd say it's better. I'm guessing every urban community has similar things, but I also know, just being in a number of national conversations around urban Indian communities, that people still look to Minneapolis and St. Paul. They still look to the Twin Cities for the sort of innovations. Although I look to other communities and it seems like they're doing so much more, you know, but I don't know that a lot of other communities have the relationships with the public sector, even private sector, that we have here.
Wow. Well, you know, I thank you so much, Peony Gigi, for staying on with us for like 3 segments
Yeah.
and really bringing in the information. I really, really appreciate you being on. And wow, the show is ending. You got 30 seconds to say something.
I have 30 seconds to say something?
Yeah.
Okay. Good
dramatic
health,
ending.
safety, get your shot, wear your mask, take care of your youth, take care of the elders, and stay healthy.
Wow, perfect. Thank you so much. That is a good way to end this. And what I would like to do is I would like to end with these thoughts. If you're listening to this show, you are part of the resistance. From Chief Plentycoops, the ground on which we stand on is sacred ground. It is the blood of our ancestors. We need to resist, divest, join a group, run for office. You've been listening to Native Roots Radio presents I'm Awake, and I want to thank Ogama with the news and especially our special guest, Robert Lilligren. If you're listening to this, you are part of the resistance. We're still here. We are the seventh generation. Free Leonard Peltier. Stop line 3.
Viva